Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the final video for completing a square is more of a this is a cool connection between this lesson and the next lesson. So if you are at the point now where you are, not paying close attention, you might as well skip this video. This video is designed to help us draw a connection between completing the square and the quadratic formula, which are the two, I would say, overall best approaches for solving a quadratic because they both always work. So what we're going to do is we're going to complete the square on the abstract quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In other words, we're going to rearrange the equation and solve it by completing the square without any numbers being in the equation. What this is going to do is it's going to show us what happens for literally any quadratic. It doesn't matter what numbers a, b, and c go in there. It doesn't matter if they're whole numbers, if they're integers, if they're rational numbers, if they're irrational numbers. The process would still apply here. It'll work for any real numbers a, b, and c. So again, we know that we have to have it in a certain format. So we have to move the c. So we're going to start by moving the c to the right side by subtracting c, which would give us ax squared plus bx equals negative c. The other thing that absolutely has to happen before we can complete the square is we need a coefficient on x squared of 1. So we have to, repeat, have to divide everything by a. That will give us x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. And you'll see that now we're going to be inserting our blanks, so we're making sure we have lots of room to do that. So we're going to carry out the completing the square process now. Remember that when we do this, we take the value in front of x, which in this case is b over a, and we divide it by 2. Dividing a fraction by 2 is the same as multiplying a fraction by 1/2. So we're going to multiply the denominator of our fraction by 2, which would give us b over 2a. Now, what we do next is the same as it has been in every single problem. We take that value and we square it. So we're going to take that fraction and we're going to square it. That would be b squared on top, because that's b times b, and 4a squared on the bottom, 2a times 2a. Whatever value we have there, again, just like every other example, that is going to get copied over to the right side to keep the equation balanced. Now here's the sticky part if you're not great with fractions. We need to combine these two fractions into one fraction. So to add fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So we need a common denominator for a, and for a squared, well, that would be 4a squared. So we ask ourselves, what is this fraction missing to make it 4a squared? It is missing the 4 and a second a. So we're going to multiply the bottom and the top of that fraction by 4a, which would give us negative 4ac over 4a squared when we get our common denominator, plus b squared over 4a squared. Both of those fractions are over 4a squared, so we can combine them into one fraction, b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Take a second to digest that. Pause the video if you need to and look at it. All we're doing is getting a common denominator and adding those fractions together. Next, we're going to take the square root of each side. I'm going to save a little bit of space by just drawing in that square root here. So we're taking the square root of each side. Just like every other problem, on the left side, the squared and the square root cancel, leaving x plus b over 2a. On the right side, we cannot do anything to the numerator. That becomes the square root of b squared minus 4ac. The square root of the denominator, however, is 2a. Final step, we're going to subtract b over 2a from each side. Notice that we already have a common denominator there of 2a, so this can all be written as one fraction, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This should look familiar from your Algebra 1 class. That is the quadratic formula. So the point of this is I'm trying to show you that we don't just make these things up in mathematics. Okay, the quadratic formula is a direct result of completing the square on an abstract quadratic. So what we've done here is we have managed to take a quadratic that could literally be any quadratic. We could put in any real numbers we want, a, b, and c, and we have come up with exactly what x would equal if we just plug a, b, and c in. So our next lesson will use this quadratic formula as our final solving method. Again, it's very important that you find methods that will work every single time. Completing the square and quadratic formula always work. Always. So you need to figure out which one of these you like, completing the square of the quadratic formula, and be prepared to use it to solve quadratic equations. If it factors, you are 100% correct that solving by factoring would be quicker, but not every quadratic factors. So you need to know how to use either completing the square flawlessly or the quadratic formula flawlessly. Next lesson will cover the quadratic formula. Thank you for your time.